Good morning and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 7. For those of you that have been following along with us, you'll remember that the author of Hebrews is trying to show us that Jesus is superior to all things. He mentions that Jesus is superior to angels, that he is greater than Moses, that he is better than the high priests, even though they were the ones that were able to enter into the Holy of Holies. Jesus himself was able to enter the Holy of Holies, and he removed the barrier between us and God. All of these things show that Jesus is superior to all things. In chapter 7, I believe the author wants to show us that Jesus is better than any intercessor that has gone before or ever will be. If you were brought up on charges and sent to the judge, and you did not have anybody to speak for you, what would you do? You would probably go out and hire the best attorney that you could find, that you could afford. And you would ask that attorney to be your defense. Why? Because he knows the law. They are prepared, they're schooled, they have education, they know how to present facts and how to counter those who are bringing false charges or bringing evidence that is unprepared or inappropriate or whatever it might be. You want an attorney who can speak for you, who can defend you, who can help you be able to present a case that would get you out of trouble. Jesus Christ is our perfect defense attorney. And I believe that's what the author wants to show here in chapter 7. But before he does that, he starts off by talking about the great high priest, Melchizedek. Now, Melchizedek, if you remember from Genesis chapter 14, was during Abraham's time. Abraham had gone out to defeat the 4 kings who had taken over these cities where Lot and his family lived. Lot was the nephew of Abraham, and he goes out to take over these 4 kings and to take back the plunder and those people who were taken from these cities, including Lot and his family. And Abraham is able to do that because of God blessing him. On his way back, the king of Salem, also known as Shalom, peace, the king of peace, came out. His name is Melchizedek. And Melchizedek blesses Abraham, and in turn, Abraham gives him 1/10 of all that he has taken in the plunder. Melchizedek is called the priest of God Most High. Also, it's set up that Melchizedek does not have a beginning or an end. All of these things are paralleling who Jesus is, because Jesus is the King of peace. It also mentions here in chapter 7 of Hebrews that he is the King of righteousness. Jesus Christ is the King of righteousness. He's the King of peace and the King of righteousness, just like Melchizedek is. He is also one without beginning and without end. He will be the priest forever. All of these things are similar to Melchizedek. Also, the fact that Melchizedek was not from the family of the Levites that was set up under the Levitical law to be the priests for the people of Israel. He was not from that because he was before Levi. He was back in the day of Abraham, so he would have been prior to the Levitical law. Well, Jesus also is not from the house of Levi. He is from the house of Judah. And so he would not fall under that Levitical law either. So he is similar in that way, in that area too. So now we come with Melchizedek and Jesus being very similar in many things. But this is where it ends. Because now, in verse 15, we see And what we have said is even more clear if another priest like Melchizedek appears, one who has become a priest, not on the basis of a regulation as to his ancestry, but on the basis of the power of the indestructible life. For it is declared, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. God himself appointed Jesus to be the high priest, to be the one going before the Father. He presented him not because he was of the Levitical priesthood, but because he was the chosen one, the one that God had chosen to be our representative before him. In verse 21, it says, but he became a priest with an oath when God said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. Jesus Christ is the priest forever, just like Melchizedek was called that, but he was appointed by God from the house of Judah. But that's not the best part. The best part is in following, it says, because of this oath, Jesus has become the guarantee of a better covenant. Jesus Christ established a new covenant. He was the new priest in a new order and brought in a new covenant. What does the covenant have to do with anything? How does it play a part? Well, it explains in verse 23, now there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office, but because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who have come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Jesus Christ will never die. He will live forever. He will be the priest forever. And because of that, his priesthood will never end. He will be the priest that goes before the Father and presents our case forever. But did you catch the point that he says here, that because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely. Another interpretation of the word that's completely there would be that forever, it will never end. Jesus, is able to be our representative before God forever. He is going before the Father. And also he says that those who come to God through him, so it's because of him, he is our representative, but he is also the one that has paid the price. He was that perfect sacrifice. He goes on to explain that in verse 26. Such a high priest meets our need, one who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from the sinners, exalted above the heavens, unlike the other priest. He does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. Jesus Christ became that perfect sacrifice. He is that perfect priest. He will be forever available for any who respond to that invitation. If we go back to verse 25, it says, therefore he is able to save completely those who come to God. The invitation, I believe, is open for all mankind. Anyone who would respond to God's invitation is welcome. But it's up to us to come to him. He has made it possible. He's given the invitation, but it's up to us to respond, to accept that invitation. In verse 27, he said that unlike the other priests, there were many priests that went before. Unlike them, though, Jesus became that perfect sacrifice, the one that was able to stand before God the Father. And in verse 28, it says, for the law appoints as high priest men who are weak, but the oath which came after the law appointed the Son, who has been made perfect forever. Jesus Christ became our perfect advocate. He became the one that can go between man and God. He was that perfect high priest. He will always be that perfect high priest. If you were to pick an attorney to defend you before God, you could not pick a better attorney, because Jesus Christ is able to defend us, to stand before the Father, to present us and present our case. But better than all else, he is able to tell the Father, I have already bought this person. I have already paid the price. I have already made the sacrifice, so that this person, you and I, could come before the Father with his grace and his mercy, his love and his forgiveness, because of Jesus Christ. It's a beautiful story. It's one that gives us a hope of eternal life, and not a hope as I hope it happens, but a hope as a promise that was given to us. The promise given by the Father through his Son, that we could have an eternal life. So in chapter 7, we see that Jesus Christ is even better than, greater than the priest, the great high priest, Melchizedek. Jesus Christ is the perfect high priest. He is also the perfect sacrifice. And he loved us enough to give his life so that we could respond. The question is have you responded? Have you accepted the invitation? Have you taken the offered gift of eternal life? If you haven't, God is waiting. He wants you to accept that gift. Sometimes we feel like we're unworthy. Sometimes we feel like that there is no hope for us. Maybe sometimes we feel like I've made too many mistakes. How could he forgive me again? But God is waiting for us, and his Son is standing there defending us. If we will accept his invitation and enjoy the blessings, the promises, the ability to be pure, clean, and whole, presented to the Father as Jesus Christ, because we are clothed in his righteousness. When we put him on in baptism, we become a new creature, a pure, holy, and clean creature. We are presented to God as being perfect. All of these things that are represented here in Hebrews, especially here in Hebrews chapter 7, I would recommend that you go back and read. I didn't read all of chapter 7, but reread chapter 7, and also go back to Genesis chapter 14 and read that story again about Melchizedek and Abraham, and see the parallels and see the message that they have for us there. There's some beautiful parts of this and beautiful stories to be represented, but I'd recommend that you read those and enjoy those stories again. I pray that you will accept God's invitation to be his son and daughter, and that you will enjoy the peace that comes from that you will enjoy the ability to be righteous in his eyes, not because of what we've done, but because of what he's done. May you have a blessed week. Thank you for joining us.